on agenda items or other items they wish to bring to the attention of the commission or staff. Comments may be made in person by emailing publicworks@cityoflewiston.org or by calling 208-746-1316 extension 6 and leaving a message. Comments submitted by mail, by email, or by phone will be forwarded to the Public Works Advisory Commission. If you would like to have your comments read aloud during the meeting, please so indicate in your message. I don't see any citizen comments, so we'll move on to the active agenda. We're doing okay, but we just can't make a decision.
Yeah.
So
So
just,
if you wanted to vote on anything, that would have to be pushed to January.
okay. But we can talk, there's a lot here to talk about, so.
Yes. Yeah, you can still discuss, just no final decisions can be made today.
All right, so first on the active agenda is draft policy and procedures for neighborhood traffic calming request. Soliciting feedback on the draft policy which would replace the existing traffic calming request review process and assist in implementing a residential traffic calming program for the city of Lewiston. I thought it was pretty well done.
So that was, we talked about school zones. This is a little bit different. So traffic calming, I think is one of the more common requests that we get in public works, whether it's a new sign that they want or I would say cut through speeding, whether it's a school zone or a residential neighborhood, we get a lot of those requests. And so typically what we have done, and we have some guidance loosely within the master plan, transportation master plan, and some of our own internal policies. And Luke Antonich, city engineers here. And so generally, the first thing we look at is what do we have for traffic data and accident data? So if there's anything that people more often than not, and this is not, I do it myself, I have kids and I live on a residential neighborhood. You perceive the cars are traveling faster, you perceive there's more cars, you perceive that people are driving at an unsafe speed or style. And so a lot of times you will look and you will see no accidents or minimal accidents or accidents that had no impact based off of impaired drivers or something like conditions or something like that. And then we'll do speed studies. And the speed studies will, weigh out that they're within what we call the 85th percentile, or if they are at kind of the upper echelon, if it's 25 and the 85th percentile is 27, a lot of times we'll coordinate with PD and they'll go out and put a car there. What we have found, and you'll see it in speed studies often, it's usually, especially in residential neighborhoods, it's one neighbor. The neighbors down the street, their kid got their driver's license or they're home for college and they zip through that street continuously, going to work. It's the same car at the same time, same day. And if you get a patrol car out there, just kind of remind them what the speed limit is. That will correct that issue. So those are kind of the most, I'd say 90% of what we see, just correcting behaviors on select few or showing that, the data is here. It doesn't show that there is a concern from an engineering perspective. What I have worked with in the past is what's called a traffic calming program. And so it gives people a little bit more assurance that they're just not being passively dismissed, that, oh yeah, you're fine. We're busy. We don't really want to hear about it. And I think we have talked through the school zone. There is the hierarchy of how we like to look at these issues, and it starts with the data, then it goes to enforcement, and then we look at, is there some things that we can tweak in the road section that will, I think I talked psychologically, make the driver feel more restrictive, or more obstructions out there. So if you're driving on Main Street, you would not feel comfortable driving 60 miles an hour down the Main Street just because you've got bulb outs, you've got trees, you've got parking, you've got pedestrians, but the bypass, you feel a little bit more safe going 40, 50, 60 miles an hour. And so we'll look at, and particularly, I think Lewiston is prime for some of these policies that we could look at implementing, because we have a lot of areas, particularly in the orchards, that have larger block lengths. And we're not gonna push a street through the middle of a block that's been there for 100 years. So what can we do? It may be in a school zone, it may be in an area that just feels wider than other areas. That we can do bulb outs, and everybody has feedback. Not a fan of, I'm okay with bulb outs. Bulb outs are a maintenance issue, because if you make them too tight, you can't get street sweepers, it collects snow, it collects dust, it's dirty. So you need to make sure that you can get the radiuses through there. I am not a fan of speed bumps or speed tables. What I've found with speed bumps and speed tables, particularly in a dense residential area, a car will come in there and they'll downshift and wind up, and if they got anything in the back of the truck, it'll hop up and slap the back, and then and so you just went from something that's obnoxious that you perceive as a speed. Now every vehicle is now gonna slow down and speed up, slow down, speed up, and so it becomes more of an obnoxious issue. A third parameter that I have gotten feedback on just recently is fire, emergency response. Our insurance rates are based off of response times. So if we put some major traffic calming measure on an arterial, and the fire police have to get through there, and it reduces their response time. Chief Reitmeyer sent me some data that shows kind of the impact of every second lost in response time and how that can compound and make, it'll impact our insurance rates. It obviously impacts our response times, but it impacts our insurance rates. That's the one that hits you the worst, is you're not gonna pay more for your homeowner's insurance.
But you have lists of parameters for those, correct, right now?
Yes. So Luke and I drafted, and it's been on the shelf for quite some time, this draft policy that was in your packet that kind of outlines mostly what I just talked about, of generally giving a member of the public, I am adamant that these people are cutting through my neighborhood, they're speeding through, and they don't live here, and my kids and my pets are at risk, and the city needs to do something. So they don't want to be dismissed. So this tells them, here's the steps in addressing it, and each, if it, okay, yes, we have demonstrable data that it is cut through speeding traffic. Okay, we move to the next. We have contacted PD. PD has written X amount of tickets in a certain amount of time. It's still happening, so progressively we work through the checklist until we find a way to solve the issue. So this is generally kind of how the process works. It is in draft form. I have not looked at it in at least probably a year or two. I don't know, was anything amended in this recently?
No, since the last time we touched it.
Okay, so this is something that we've put together. It's been sitting on the shelf mostly because we get a lot of requests for speeders, and everybody wants to come in right away to the speed bumps. Just put some speed bumps down and we'll fix that. And so that's our least preferable option. There's probably better options. So we don't get a lot of those. It's mostly speed studies, more enforcement. But this would be a policy that I think we could probably get feedback from this body and get it in place, and then we have some procedure, a more defined procedure moving forward.
Yeah, I read through it, and I think overall it's pretty good. There's a few corrections that may make sense to make, maybe not. One of them, I guess section 7 and 8 were the couple that I kind of keyed in with more than some of the others. So
What page?
page 7 in the packet, page 7 in the packet, page 3 of the policy.
Page 3 of the policy, thank you.
The one, I guess, with this being is this a department or a city policy? And I guess I don't know that if there's a difference of what you can force up to the city council to make a decision on as far as putting that fee in there for the appeal. If That's something that the city council would actually vote on, would be the appeal fee.
Yeah, there is, the appeal fee is in our fees,
Okay.
that is adopted by resolution every year.
Okay.
So that is the fee itself is a separate,
Okay, so that's already in place, so
Yep,
if you were to implement this policy,
Yep,
it would be set from day one.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, and that's a good question as far as, and I think we talked about it last week, Public Works, an internal policy versus policy adopted by the council. And this one, I could go either way. Typically, it's like a master plan or something that you're gonna use as a formal document, I would want adopted by resolution. So like the school zones, I think that would merit having that adopted by council, because somebody could come and say specifically, this is a hindrance, what is, that could be used to mitigate liability, where something like this, I could go either way, I guess. Whether it should be adopted by resolution by the council, or if we just keep it as an internal policy that we go by.
sure.
So leading, just to kind of follow up on that, so that was one of my questions, because in the beginning it says, we'll process, so my first big question is, where is this posted, or is this an internal policy or for the community to read? Because they kind of need something, I mean, I understand, internal staff, but the community kind of needs to understand the process as well, so I didn't know exactly what this was, if this was internal or external. And then my other question was, because I went through the website and whatnot, is this the first time you've written a policy for this?
It is yes, as far as I'm aware, yes, it is the first
I
time.
couldn't find
No,
anything.
this is from scratch, so, yes, I was not aware of an existing policy that we used, that we updated, so this is all new.
And your thought process of internal or external or both?
As far as having it available, or?
Yes,
Yeah.
is this something, and the reason I'm asking, because it goes to one of my other questions down in the document I have is, there appears to be two different forms. So there's the one inside our packet, and then online, there's a different one, and I researched it. So I see two different formats. So that was my other concern as to asking.
Yes, so the citizen traffic control request form, that's the current form that we use. And if we were to adopt this,
This is, and this, so this
formula,
is.
it would replace that.
Okay, okay. So so that goes back to this question then. So I found that form, but I didn't find anything to kind of help someone understand, the process. So that's why I was wondering if this was the first time and what your
Yeah,
thoughts were.
Yeah, I think that's the gist of providing a little bit more guidance. And whether it be guidance or my big push is that I want to make sure whatever it is, if they're coming in for a building permit or they're concerned about something, that they are given the option or able to look at the policy to see, okay, I'm on step 2, I got to get to step 8 before something, that they just, I get frustrated myself when you come in there and you're like, okay, I turned this form in, is somebody gonna call me back, and what is this, is anybody gonna do anything? So to be clear is, this is your roadmap forward. You may get to step 3 and it's answered and we're done, or we may get all the way through to completion of something else. So yeah, that's my big concern, or not my big push, is to just have clarity in the process.
Okay. I have lots of questions. I'm sorry. You can all shoot me later, I'm sorry.
That's why we got you here.
I have a couple of kind of formatting or terms, but I'm not gonna kind of go into all of those, but on the second page, H, what is a functional street classification system? Just out of inquiring minds would like to know.
Second, hey, where are you at?
Page 2 of the policy H, what is a functional street classification system? Because it says shall, which is my next item. Because it says above it, primary criteria and all this bit, and it says functional street. What is that?
So the functional street classification system is what we are currently using as our street classification system. and it is defined within RGIS. So if we go in there and click on a street and we have it classified as a local, then we treat it as classified as an arterial, we treat it as an arterial, and that would be updated with our master plan update, or if traffic counts for some reason, push that to the place where it needs to be updated.
Okay.
So in other words, how the street should function is why it's worded that way.
Are you seeing some, like, I see the
So-
smile, what is your, I take it that's not clear, so
Well,
what is your suggestion for
it's
clarifying?
it's kind of a little confusing and whatnot. And there's a couple other terms and stuff here which regular folks in the community may not understand. And so maybe at the end, maybe just have maybe a few definitions or something, just to kind of help folks out. So, you know, if they are going through this, they can kind of see some definitions and understand some of these terms. You know, because you have to realize that'll just, people will say, well, then I have no idea what that is, so I don't have a chance, you know, such and such. So, and the reason that's kind of an important one, and one of the issues I have through this whole document, is the use of will or shall, because that one says shall. So if you say shall, that is, it has to be done. If it's not, then, you know, it would be will. So I noticed like above, the evaluation, F says the evaluation need for the installation of traffic calming devices will be based on traffic volumes and such. So I'm like, well, is that will or is that shall? So going through this, I hit a lot of those, because like even in one of the back paragraphs, the one sentence will develop a traffic calming plan, and then the traffic plan shall describe the proposed device, you know, device effects, and that's on the last page, a traffic calming plan. So you have within the same paragraph, will and shall. So that makes it kind of confusing. So, and just from my past life, that is a huge deal when you're dealing with the community and others and stuff, is the will and shall. Not everybody knows what will and shall mean, but it is your basis of, you know, if there's something you have to have, you'll put like shall, like it has to go, it shall go before the police department or something like that. I'm just throwing that out there to make sure that they've evaluated it or something, you know, and then wills are basically, that's at our pleasure.
We're actually amending a separate wastewater pretreatment provision currently with legal, and so we said this is what the CFRs and what we have to say, cut and paste, that this'll fix our job, and the attorneys came in, we spent 20 minutes talking about the stuff that we actually need to do, but then the rest, the other 40 minutes, we're talking about wills versus shalls, and fortunately, we have attorneys that review a lot of these and say, oh, no, that cannot be shall. I'm like, oh, okay, so.
Yeah.
But yes, I think.
So, because I was going through, I'm like, okay, well, you have a will on this one, you shall on that one, but maybe that's a shall and this is a will, or,
I picked up on one of those too, that the way it reads is a little funky, so, I mean, kind of in that same procedures, number 7, the mayor's review shall be limited in scope and shall be intended to confirm that the city's engineer's decision is consistent with the policy, and then that's kind of like you're telling the mayor what he needs to do, instead of, there's gotta be a way to wordsmith that to not direct a decision or make the citizen
May is
feel-
the other word, will,
Yeah.
shall, and may.
Yeah. Reading that as a citizen, right, it's like, well, I don't have a chance with my appeal, it's, everything's stacked
Yeah, it's
against
funny,
me, so
I
there
make
should
sure
be a
these
way
to
to.
attorneys, because we actually have had that conversation too, in that an appeal, you're only appealing the decision. And so, and if we don't wanna write it like that, but we've had animal at large, or whatever you want to call it. And the way the code is currently written on that is the mayor can only support staff or reverse that. There's no alternative, you know, coming up with, well, can we try this or kind of that? No, you're only appealing the decision. And so is that what you want? Or do you want to have, you know, the mayor to have more flexibility to say, no, I think we pull it back, or we extend the deadline, or do, you know, something else. So that may not allow for that as it's written, so. Things that I, again, as an engineer, don't really consider, but as a wordsmith, legal person, that you need to make sure.
All right. Yeah, and having lived in this city manager's office, when all these wonderful people come to the door, you can answer their questions. I learned a lot. In that same one, the traffic calming device request, which is procedures 2A on page 2. For consistency, the first sentence talks about written request submitted to the City of Lewiston Citizens Traffic Request Form, and that's when I said there's two different forms, which one? To the City of Lewiston Public Works Department, and I said maybe add engineering division here to coordinate below, because below and going forward, everything is engineering division. So that way they understand that the engineering division is the one in the Public Works Department. And then my other comment is, it's kind of confusing, and so I'm gonna kind of do this kind of twofold. The next section with procedures, when I'm reading through this, are these kind of the steps to go through with the form, or when the form is received? Because it seems like you should add like maybe something after that once we receive the form, these are kind of, maybe take that first sentence and use that kind of as your going forward, saying, okay, so once we get your form, these are the steps we're gonna go through to do that. And then the other thing I typically see, or to kind of help the community, is maybe consider pulling the whole appeal portion of it. So you just have the steps, of this is your whole process. Typically, just because the attorneys I've had to deal with over the years, they want the appeals in a totally separate section.
That makes sense.
So that way you have all your procedures, and then later, after everything, after you described everything, if you wish to appeal, here's the appeal process. And so they kind of usually put that towards the end, and then that's where that can be discussed as well. So that was my only kind of thing. It's like, okay, so these are the steps, and then you go into the appeals. And then as I'm going through the procedures, number 6, I was really curious. Are all traffic calming requests circulated to PD and fire?
Yes.
So that would be a shall instead of a will, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I noticed that B, down below on page 3, is the same title as A. Traffic calming device request procedure. Traffic calming device request procedure, it's almost, they both are the same, so they both are identical. And then you have a must in A. And then under the potential traffic calming devices, is it possible maybe to put some pictures? That helps people. If this is an
Yeah.
external one,
If it's-
pictures help people.
I think that would be something for
They-
somebody
they
to
kind of-
see.
Then they can kind of understand better. And then, they're not saying, well, what's this? And it kind of saves you time, so that they're not asking all those wonderful questions. And again, just wills and shalls. And, yeah. My things, basically.
Can you email us, just in case we missed the?
A couple other that I have, in that same appeal area, that the mayor shall hold a hearing within 10 days, that's a pretty tight schedule, depending on what people have for vacations and everything else. It'd probably be better to bump that out to 30. And then gotta be either remove the sentence, the mayor's review of the city's engineer's order of decision shall be de novo. I had to look up what that means. So it doesn't seem like it adds anything to that paragraph. You just scratch that off.
What is this part again? Sorry.
It's the page 3, 7, and 8, that we were going back to the appeals process. Yeah, I got that too.
I'll have to cross-reference just the
But
city code.
the only thing I can think of is, and that's why I said usually city attorneys like their appeals process in the thing, because they have their own the standards. And so, like you were saying, being consistent with the appeals process. So if like code enforcement has 30 days to do an appeal, you want this one to be 30 days instead of 10. If So sometimes that language for consistency makes everybody on the same page for appeals.
I will have to look at that, because I know like the animal one is a quick one, because you have an animal at limbo, so you wanna have an
Yeah.
appeal on
Oh,
that.
yeah.
So that might be matching that language in there. I don't know if it has to, but I'm sure there's some basis as to why they have the 10 days. That for traffic calming, it's probably not as urgent as an animal or some
Yeah.
other form of appeal.
But yes, there's a lot to a traffic calming policy. It's got a lot of nuances. I like the form.
Yeah.
It's much better than the one that's online right now that allows people to, allows you to get more information up front. So I thought this form was a lot better.
In the day and age of Facebook, there seems to be a lot of people who make a comment and I've done what I have to do, and you guys go fix that. Whereas if you have something like this and you collect signatures and you show that it's not just me, here are some pictures, here are, this is an issue.
Right.
They're more vested in it than somebody just making
Yeah.
a comment online, so.
No, I think this is much better. This helps everybody think the situation through.
Well done as far as the question for them to address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, what I will do is we will incorporate those changes. It will still be in draft form. I think I will submit this to legal for them to take a look at it and get their feedback on whether they feel it should be adopted by resolution by the council, or if it's more appropriate to keep it as an internal policy. And then I'll give you guys the update as to where we are on.
I'll be curious on that. I'll be very curious, just because sometimes with traffic calming, you'll need some leeway.
Yeah, and I may be now leaning towards having it adopted by the council. Just one, it keeps the council aware and the public aware of the policies that we have available for the public. Internal policies are more appropriateness from my perspective of staffing the front desk,
Right.
checking out a fleet vehicle, things like that have very little impact to the public, where this has a lot of impact on the public, so. Okay, so we will clean this up, get feedback from legal, and if it goes to council, I'm assuming you guys are okay if we don't bring this back? Or do you guys wanna take one last bite of the apple? If it goes to council, or if it's signed by me for an internal policy, do you wanna have another final look at it before we formalize it?
If we're just missing so many people today,
Okay,
that's the only, we've seen it, but my only concern is to make sure that the other members of the committee just get a chance to make sure.
okay.
It is kind of a big deal. Traffic calming affects every single person here.
Okay, once we get it more finalized, we will bring it back, and maybe we'll just put it on here for one final review.
that's my
We don't have to
opinion.
discuss it, it's just more of, if the group has something, some member who wasn't here saying, wait a minute, I wanna vet this out, but generally I would hope that.
There's two other commissioners here, they can have. I just think, I just wanna make sure everybody kind of has a say on it, that's all.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's been in our packet a few different times now, so if they haven't,
We get very busy.
yeah. I would assume everybody's kind of reviewed it. For me, if we get one other shot at it, it'd be great. We could just say, have a short session, or portion of a meeting to
Okay,
Yeah,
anything,
I wouldn't think you had to go to all the work of having red lines in there to show what was
No.
and what is.
okay,
And yeah, don't do all that red line.
okay.
It's
I will,
very confusing.
it may be a couple meetings before now that it's in the hands of legal, they have their plates full, so, I will update the this board as I get more information.
That's great.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next active agenda item, which is recommendations for Transportation Capital Improvement Plan, the CIP. The commission's members' opportunity to provide recommendations of new projects and or changes to existing projects directly to city staff.
Kind of a continuation from our last Friday meeting.
Yeah, so,
And
Council-
so I'll just say,
Okay.
so I did take the comments that were provided on Friday and I did add them to our public comment log that we do every year for the annual update, so they are with the engineer. Give that update before we dived in.
so two topics on this. One, we can, if there's more projects, or if there's any details regarding the CIP, we can keep talking about that. I think this was about where I had to leave at the last meeting, so I don't know what was discussed after I left. We can go through all of this and discuss at length. I'm always happy to receive more feedback on the CIP because I don't feel like we get enough. As important as it is, I don't feel like we get enough feedback. So please provide feedback. But there was a conversation at council on Monday night that kind of confused
Oh, everybody.
everybody. So,
Sorry it got like that.
uh,
I think that we were confused as well, and I certainly was, and I will tell you that I probably created the confusion. Because when I see Main and D Street and we're going to do something to it, I know what all has to go in there. And so in my mind, that's all in there,
yeah,
and it's not.
yeah, and I'm,
So I apologize.
I know you have some material.
I brought, so,
Oh my
so we
goodness.
started talking about it. These are just portions of it, and you and I had that conversation, so to help council and particularly the community, and having sat through over all the years, various meetings with regards to the CIP, it is one of the most critical components, I feel, after, yes, out of budgets and everything. It is one of your largest budget items. It's one of the largest things that affects every resident within the community is your CIP. Because and that's why Public Works is so important. I mean, I know PD and fire get all the credit and stuff like that, but it's their shiny badges and uniforms.
We
But-
prefer that we get the credit, we'll just keep doing it.
No. And it's really critical for the community to understand the complexity of what Public Works it has to face. And having watched that over the years, even your fellow staff members really truly don't always understand what goes into it and what's there. And I, was fortunate, having worked in the various departments and stuff, I was able to see, a CIP kind of grow within the city I was working for. But I also saw fellow cities and communities throughout where people I knew, colleagues I got a chance to, friend and see it at various meetings and stuff throughout the state, what they were going through their CIPs, and when I also was instructed to get research on other cities and what they're doing and how they're handling things. So when I really appreciated last time Commissioner Rader had asked Commissioner Schroeder about, how did this become number one, in that whole process. And when she described this, we all kind of look and go, that's not all there. That's not, you're describing like 10 times more than what's there. And then Haley was very, she goes, that's just a transportation one. So in our conversation then, I kind of mentioned, well, it sounds like for residents to kind of understand, council member and everybody, what it is, it sounds like a more complete CIP needs to be done. And so I brought a couple examples just to kind of, here, I'll let you guys take one and you can pass it around. The thing that I like about the city I used to work for used to do a 10-year. They went down to a 5-year because 10 years was just too unrealistic. I know some cities are still doing kind of like a 10-year. But what they did is a rolling 5-year CIP. And what that was trying to do is that every year they would look at their rolling 5 years so that you're always looking 5 years out for funding and where all the money is. And I didn't mean for you to hand it out, but thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And so what's nice is that the big things in here is it describes where the money comes from and where some of the money is allocated. It shows completed like CIPs. It gives sort of a summary of all of the various departments. So you have water, you have sewer, you have parks, you have facilities. At one point, I was our power company's there. I have the marina's listed in there as well. It's with all of with the projects. You get kind of an overall budget in there over the years, what the monies are, and then your fund balances. So you're kind of rolling it over. It helps someone understand that, okay, highway user tax funds, we get so much in, and it can kind of see where those are allocated, because gas tax funds coming in are always a huge deal, and people don't, and they go to various projects. You don't just all put them into one, they get kind of split up based on things that are going on. And then what's also nice is that there's also a project summary with everything item. It lists the project, it tells the estimated costs, identifies like new allocation, because sometimes every year, sometimes they have to add a new one, future allocation or existing, so you can kind of get an idea of where some of the funds are, what the project funding is, and what they're planning to do over the next few years to get the total funding. And sometimes there won't be, so they acknowledge that as well. But at least it's kind of written there. And one of the ones I saw, but I couldn't find it, they did like their top 10, top 20 projects that they were trying to focus on. And I was trying to find that, but so like you could take like this huge list and you could just basically, even though everything's listed, you can say, these are our top 10 that we need to focus on to try and do something. They put that like in the summary portion of it. And then what's also nice is and I didn't print every single one, is they give a really nice identifier of, the project, the location, a picture. If it's a replacement thing, they'll show diagrams of it, they'll show maps. Everybody kind of does it a little bit differently, so this other city, they identify where the sources of funds are. You can kind of see what they're planning over the next few years, and then a full detailed description. So that some of these can be very complex, where you're bringing in maybe 10 different funds, 5 different funds, and it identifies that. If there's a grant that came in, they'll note that a grant's come in, and they'll put the dollar amount. So you know that it's partially funded. And so when they come and do the presentation to a board, to the councils, they'll always do it before budget season, so that they get a copy of this. And then after budget season, after the budget's passed, then they sort of adopt and bless it. So anyway, this kind of helps, because then you're seeing everything outlined. You know that, so much money is coming in, the funding over the years, and like I said, what funds, where all the different money comes from, and when some funds are restricted and some funds aren't. So it's usually, it reads very easy, I think. I know they've had to work on it a lot, but everybody's kind of gotten educated on it, and then they can go back and see what the main, and I didn't print every single project. Every single project has a page. So I just gave a couple samples for people to see. But it helps, traffic, these are a little bit different, but it's also kind of the same thing, is, you see roadway funds, parking fees, developer fees, grants, reserves, because some funds have reserves for projects. And then that way you know where everything's funded for a project. So, not sure, like for the top one, if money is coming from water and sewer to support this. And so let's just say, I don't know, this, since that kind of what started the whole conversation, Main Street and D Street, let's say the whole project, and this is just hypothetical, is 28 million. And so you know that 12 million of that is, you know, kind of transportation items, so you're gonna be looking at gas tax or this. Part of that 28 million is gonna be water, so water fund has, you know, 4 million dedicated to that. Sewer is gonna be another 4 million because of the sewer liner, you know, so you have all of those funds identified so that when, you know, it goes before the formal bodies of our, you know, they can see, well, and it helps the director and staff, especially when they're put under the gun, and they do get put under the gun, you know, when they go and they go, so where are we at financially on this? You know, they can look at their kind of their cheat sheet saying, so at this point, you know we have this coming in, that amount, we've got, you know, gas tax, we got this funding, we got that funding, you know, so we're about 42% there. You know, if we could in the next 3 years, if we, you know, it helps them give guidance to the council, and you can see this from a working document, saying we could pull here or here, finance at this, and we could possibly be there in 5 years. You know, it's more of a kind of a way to work through, you know, instead of just kind of moving them around and trying to figure out, but then not knowing if that's all the money in that, you know, project, so to speak. So that's all I was trying to bring to everyone's attention the other day, sorry.
I will say this is exactly why we created this board, because engineers tend to get, they're like trains, we get on the rails and we go that direction and we want to stay that direction. And so I have worked under exactly this, where you have the 10-year, you know, here's your project, here's a picture or a map, here's where the funding sources are, and here's where we are, and identifies the project. And in fact, even our stormwater CIP, it is a 5-year stormwater, because it's a new utility, and so we're starting from scratch, and so we use that format for that. And it's a little bit, I guess, the projects are more achievable, more bite-sized than maybe some of our transportation projects that are, you know, tens of millions of dollars that have not
Right.
enough funding. So I guess I agree, I appreciate, and I think that's a direction that, especially as we get closer, as we take the direction moving towards budget, I think I may work with either this board or you directly to kind of format when I go for that transition from the CIP to the budget, to be able to say exactly like you say, here is Public Works 5-year CIP, and show you exactly, here's the projects for wastewater, here's the projects for water and sewer. The transportation one would be a little light. We've completed one capital project in the last year. We have none scheduled for 24. I mean, and so that in itself is just indicative of where the funding has fallen. Well, it's indicative of where the funding has fallen in the past, and generally the size of the projects that we're gonna be taking on in transportation. Moving forward, I hope that we are able to overlap. The biggest issue that we're having right now is with so many enterprise funds, so water, wastewater, and now stormwater, and then you've got transportation, which will draw out of multiple buckets on this side of the ledger. Case in point would be water. Water is hurting right now as far as the budget. And so it's so dynamic, I wouldn't say month to month, but maybe quarter to quarter, where January of 2023, I had a pretty good idea where we were gonna be able to invest our water capital. Well, after we had a reservoir happen, now our priorities have shifted, and that will probably impact, maybe not this year, but next year, which streets were we gonna do, because I don't have money for the water, and so that shifts, and so there's that component, and then there's also the component where Luke's team in asset management is trying to compile all of the data. The data isn't quite all there yet. for the, say, pipe condition, pavement condition, where we're able to, when we get there, and I don't know how many more years we're away from it, but we're getting pretty close, where we can basically run a report and say, give me every road that has a pavement condition of under 70, a pipe index of under 5, and a pipe material of this, and it'll print out a query and say, these are the roads, and so now, when we start talking about our 5-year CIP, that one is now gonna be on the top of the list, or will be higher than maybe would have considered it before we had all this data available.
And I think that's kind of, I think, so when you're seeing this, I mean, you're seeing streets, you're seeing signals, you're seeing water, you're seeing sewer, you're seeing storm drains, you're seeing buildings, you're seeing parks, general power in the marina, so these are some of the categories here, so you would have those various components. But then it also describes where your funding source is, so this gives a summary for not only for a new council member or, whoever, but a community member can say, okay, so signals, these are, what does this mean? And then it kind of shows where some of the funding sources can come from. So then when you're going through, you're seeing all the streets, you're seeing all the signals, you're seeing all the water projects, you're seeing all the storm drain projects, you're seeing everything all together. So you know where some of the funding sources are, but it also helps identify the grants and things of that nature, so when you're looking at all of the various projects, council members, the community and all can kind of look at a kind of a complete project, and, in the beginning, it only tells about, some of the projects completed. Yeah, a lot of them, you're right, streets don't get, street maintenance does, so street maintenance is always gonna be a CIP item, and it shows, over the next few years, you have so much money identified, so 600,000, let's just throw out there, that's fairly low, so forgive me. But the council's already said we're gonna take, it helps them in your self-budget saying, okay, we get 2 million from gas tax, I don't know what it is. And then you can say, so we get 2 million a year, so if we take 75,000 from that 2 million every year that comes in, we'll plug it into this so that we know over the next 5 years, the streets will be funded to this level, in that. The excess then will go to this project for this project for that. So there people can see where does that 2 million go? That's.
And I think I have an unfinished email from a counselor that as they've injected $1.6 million annually into the street program, where is that money going? And so to be able to give them, and it doesn't have to be very complicated, but a simple ledger spreadsheet that says.
These spreadsheets are invaluable.
Yeah.
And it shows, it also helps when you're working with finance. That's the other big thing is it's not that we it's just sometimes it's good that we're on the same page about a project, that that you put 2 million in there and you want to make sure finance has the same numbers you do for that 2 million, just kind of saying, so that we're all on the same page financially, that the money is actually in that account. And that helps, I know engineers when they're going in to look for, whether they're trying to start the design, trying to do the planning and all that bit, and answer to you and the council, then the engineer goes, okay, I went to finance, I looked up this account, my 2 million is there, we're gonna pull 150,000 out to start, the such and such, and then they document it in the CIP and it's noted, and so you can see everybody's kind of on the same page, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I agree, and that's where I wanna head. The problem that we have had and I think I said it in the introduction, is I want as much feedback as I can on generally what streets are in need. And so, for this process right now, just tell me, is this description correct? And maybe, the description is, or the feedback is, please include utilities. And I think that's probably some worthwhile conversations, because there's streets out there in the orchards that are not ours. I mean, the streets are ours, but the utilities are not ours to maintain. And so that would change the conversation when we're talking about the scope of the project. So that's something that we could change. But generally, I don't get enough feedback, so please tell me what.
And I think, so you just brought up something very important. So a lot of people would not know say that to you because, you know, they're not, so that would be one of the funding sources is your private utility, whether, you know, whoever it is.
Yeah.
And you would put that in there saying some of the other private fundings are this, so that then when somebody does ask, saying, do we have, you know, then it kind of, you know, looking at this, it's hard to get those kind of questions because people aren't going to kind of know. This kind of triggers a little bit more you know, a little bit more, what about this, what about that? Oh, do we need to consider this? And that's how it opens the conversation, because it's hard, like I said, just kind of reading this, to get that feedback from folks. I wouldn't even know to give that to you from reading this. Nothing personal, it's just, I know you're
No, I think,
wanting.
because the mayor reached out to me after Monday night and.
Sorry.
No, I think, I am 100% behind trying to, the data, as I said, it's not necessarily organized quite yet in the Cartograph asset management software, but we don't have to get 100% of the roads. I don't have to get the data that we have compiled for, you know, I know all of the projects that we're gonna be taking on in '23. I know what the budget is, I know what so all of that is there. I think I can present it clearer than what I have in the past, and so I think this feedback is something that's constructive, that will allow me to put a little bit more pictures, put a little bit more narrative behind where are we going and I think a 5-year CIP is probably a good path for, say it's a public works 5-year CIP. Here's the projects that we're taking on moving forward. And then as we move forward, we can build off of that. We're able to better inform our decisions on the stuff as we get more complete data from our asset management software, and then probably, as you said, a more informed council, more informed staff, more informed public can better direct us where we want to go.
It would be kind of a rolling CIP, and the reason I say, because every year you're
Yep.
gonna bring it back,
Yep.
you'll update the document, but then the community can, like, you'll see in some of these, they provide new projects, because now they start seeing this, they provide new projects to you, and they can be added.
And I still think there is a value of having an unconsolidated CIP for each individual utility or, you know, for transportation. I don't want to include 153 projects that are all saying, meh, no funding to it, but that will allow, you know, so we send out, are these still relevant projects out there? And then I can take that information and update our 5-year CIP.
That's where like this list itself doesn't seem practical, right? There's $50 million worth of updating sidewalks around schools. That's never gonna happen. It seems like it needs to be focused a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
instead of-
yeah.
Instead of
Yeah.
the shotgun approach or
Yeah,
whatever, you know,
it's
whenever you
broken
had a
it into
consultant look at the
2
city, and
segments.
these are all the different projects that you could do, but
Yeah.
what do you actually wanna do? And you don't get any of that direction from this.
Yeah.
With the current ranking, and it'd be nice to have some kind of a guidance on the side of when the expected completion is, you know, either to be determined or within the next 5 years, is it gonna happen? And short and long term, if you're completely kind of redoing it with the funding sources, that'll help focus what you're actually looking to potentially do in the next few years.
Some of these you might be able to even consider grouping, so like,
Oh, yeah.
that's a very good example. But even like bike routes, so you can put all your bike routes into kind of one CIP and list them so that in the CIP, it would say bike routes. And then on the description, you would have all of the bike, you know, routes that can be listed in that description. And then you can, in your 5-year rolling, you refer to that project and you say, year one, we're gonna focus on this area, this area, this area, next area. And streets kind of does that too, because it's kind of street maintenance unless it's a big overlay or big over. So like some of the slurries and stuff, they'll kind of, some cities will just kind of say, you know, overlay, street maintenance. Another will be, you know, they'll break it and then they list them in the project. And then each year they go back to council because staff will say, we need to reprioritize such and such. And then that year gives them flexibility to say, we're gonna do these 5 projects this year. And so that's kind of another way to kind of take this list, kind of consolidate it, but still prioritize it in your budget.
When they put this list together, they took all of our plans, the existing plans, and kind of put all these projects that were ever identified in any of these plans. And you can see, one was the bike and ped plan. And so as you get down, way down on the list, starting at 100, you can see bike route, bike route, bike route, bike route,
Right.
bike lanes. And those aren't really, I won't even say, they were vetted at the time. I think that bike master plan is at least 10 years old now. It wasn't necessarily vetted really strongly for this CIP. And so some of these can kind of be on their standalone, you know, if we don't have, we used to have a more strong group that were more into the bike and ped. They haven't, I mean, COVID kind of changed, you know, not a lot of advocates that used to be around just because we haven't had meetings for 2 years, but they're not as strong as they once were. And so I don't know, not to say that these projects have lost value, but I'm just saying, you know, priorities have shifted and where those fall. It may be more appropriate to say, here's our primary surface transportation capital improvement plans. Because to try and weigh a Main Street reconstruction over a bike path is not really necessarily fair.
And then sometimes, you know, the park and rec ones in here, having those listed as well, that helps the community, because sometimes there's a correlation between a park and rec and a bike route or something to that park or something. So sometimes they'll lump that bike route to, you know, with that park and rec one, and then they can fund it with a grant. You know, sometimes they'll combine those two, because they'll see both of them right there, and then that gives them a different path for looking at how to fund that whole project in that area. So that's kind of one of the other reasons, you know, for the kind of a complete, is that you're seeing all of those, and then that helps group, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. And Kathy, do you remember, I think it was 2020? We used to do this, for all of the budget requests had to have its own page like this.
I thought so.
And it got really cumbersome because it wasn't, you would have like a $20 million project that I can fill a full page, if not more, versus training for HR that was, you know, a $3,000 line item. And so you had, it got so cluttered and cumbersome that it didn't make sense for citywide.
Right.
And so we got away from that just to declutter the process, because if it's a line item request, it's a line item request. Even if it is technically, it was on the capital side, but we've gotten away from providing too much information. And, but that's not to say, I wanna talk with, the counselors that are on this board and the mayor, because I think this has, and I might ask that you sit in, because we have a city budget, steering committee that's in just internal staff, because we were trying to revamp the budget process. And because I think right after the budget process, you provide some feedback about trying to break up operations and capital and give it more concise, and I think this kind of feeds into this. And so I want to take this to the mayor and our budget group and kind of lay this out and show them. It may be, I don't know, I'm not gonna try and spread it to all the citywide, but for Public Works, I think this has value. Because what we're trying to do, to kind of tell you what, because if you paid any attention, I don't know if you paid attention, but during the budget process, we got, you sit in this room and staff gets up and gives anywhere, I think my presentation was just under 2 hours long. Then you get the public information officer and you've got legal, and so your budgets go anywhere from $100 million to just salary. And so it's just a constant drumbeat over the course of 2 months, maybe more. And there's just way too much information, and sometimes the presentations veer into wishes and wants or updates of what they have accomplished. And so we're trying to find what is the clearest, most concise way that we can get feedback from the council, inform the public so they know what's in the budget, and make this an efficient use of our time. And if you had a printout like this, and you just said, here is what Public Works is gonna be doing in the next 5 years, it's broken into this matrix, It's not set in stone because things change over the course of time, but this is where we waited on. And it's all based off of the master plans. It's based off of, grants and funding that this is the shot of today and moving forward. So that would help Public Works capital be a little bit more concise in what we're communicating. So this conversation doesn't necessarily change the current CIP for transportation that we're collecting public input, but I think this is a well worth conversation in how we can better improve the process.
And there's a lot of tools out there for capital projects. One of the things we do in my group is an A3, which is basically a size of paper, right? Where you've got all your project information on one side and financials on the back side.
Yep.
And that's a good way to communicate a lot of stuff, and it'd be easy to include in here for at least the top 5 to 10 projects that are realistic to
Yep.
have.
And
You can have your financials on the back side where the funding is, information, pictures on the front side,
And that data,
Statuses.
I would say most of that information exists. And I think that the devil is obviously in the details of where's the cutoff? How much information are we gonna provide? And it's always, engineers are great at over-explaining every minute detail, and I always tell people, that people don't care. It's funny, but you give them, what I've found is like, here's a page, here's a simple piece of paper that says, the overall budget of the city of Lewiston is this, we adopted it on that, just here's, and then you want more information? Well, here's the public work, here's the capital one. Oh, you want here, until finally they said, okay, that's enough information, I don't need any more. Because I wanna be as transparent as possible, but I also don't wanna deluge people. I met with the new counselor last week, and it's like, I can sit here and talk to you for 5 days straight with all of the information that we have, but it's not gonna be productive.
And you'll note a lot of these have approval of the CIP does not, they both kind of say it, but it's not a constitutive appropriation of funds. Because usually with projects of this nature, you're going to take, especially with probably your financial policy, and I don't know if you have one or if that's the case. Usually, if it's over a certain amount, you have to take it to council. And so, you're going to, take each one of these projects, majority of them, to council for approval anyway on the CIP. So that's why even though you approve it and it goes through council and stuff,
Yeah.
it's going to be there.
Yeah, and that's where, and I also love that, where you can, you have counselors at different times where it's like, where did this come from? And you say, well, let me pull out, all of the planning documents, all of, where we, to date, where we have discussed this, where you are approving this contract or the final say, whatever, but here's all the things, all the steps you've taken up to this date to make this happen.
And yes, I did have a finance director years ago that made all of us fill out that form. That lasted 2 years and got nixed. I had to do that for every single thing. It must have been a phase or something nationally.
That was the finance director at the time, and I worked with him fine, but it was more of like, you finance people look at capital improvements way different than engineers do.
I had to do it for everything. It's ridiculous. Anyway, sorry, I digress, but I did have a finance manager. But it's hard for me to, on your list here, to kind of which ones to move up or, to me sometimes, and that's where it goes back, to me sometimes some of these projects get higher priority because, not just because the community wants it or whatnot, it's always money driven. Who has money? Where do we get this money? And sometimes you just get to a point, in your discussions or descriptions of everything. So as I'm understanding, that's the reason why the Main Street and D is now kind of being moved up to number 1. Then it helps seeing financially the whole picture of all, what's involved in that and how much funding do you have dedicated to it already. So then if that's going to be the priority that the council wants to take, they can explain that, and then you can, put it in this document for the community saying, this is going to be our priority. So, and they'll see where over a 5-year, how maybe some of the funding being dedicated to it. I don't know.
Yeah, some of them,
But
yeah.
it's hard for, you know, when you're looking at some of these, like, do you guys have CDBG?
Mhm.
Okay, so like, you know, reconstruction of, not the second one, reconstruction of roadway, ADA ramps and sidewalks. So obviously CDBG is a great source for ADA ramps, so I don't know if money's been dedicated to that already, or how much, or over the next few years.
I think we usually slot, I mean, now we're getting in the weeds. For
No,
CDBG,
but-
there's usually a higher or better uses for CDBG, but if it's money's not spent and it's use it or lose it, that we have it for.
And that's, you know, that's where, you know, you can look at it and say, oh, okay, it looks like CDBG got, you know, awarded to these projects, da-da-da-da-da-da, you know, and then but that's a component of that, and so people would know then that CDBG funds are a source to help with ADA ramps. That's where I'm just kind of going with this, with some of the, for the community to understand where money goes for some of these projects. And, you know, yeah. What's RRFB?
Rapid,
The rapid flashing beacon.
Oh, good lord.
There's certainly a few projects on here that seem like they probably don't make sense, either from the financial side of things or what they're trying to kind of access. And I'm kind of getting back to the sidewalks around schools. I mean, maybe it makes sense on the last page to add that to one of your upcoming studies, is just seeing where there's at least, you know, one lane of sidewalk or where that could be added, so that you could knock those three projects off there. I mean, there's $55 million on the list for that.
yeah, that, what was,
That's kind of served as like a blanket catch-all
Mhm.
one, so we have two projects, I
Two
think, this
projects
year
that are
for sidewalk
sidewalks.
near schools on Airway and Warner, is that one of them?
yeah,
I don't remember, but there's
Roughly.
two this year that kind of get lumped under that blanket and are not specifically broken out. But
It's kind of one of those things where you can only break that out so far before it becomes too cumbersome. And because when they made the CIP, there was 150 projects, they were looking for ways to consolidate. Here's everywhere we want sidewalk. Well, we know if there's a massive investment to be made in sidewalk, we'll lump that underneath one. And then when we go out for grants or whatever, we know within engineering, we know where those projects are that.
Those are prioritized somewhere not on this list.
Yes.
yeah, there is,
The
ADA transition plan
yes, that one.
has the corridors identified as priorities, and I think all of the corridors have schools within them. Even the ADA transition plan is not necessarily urban neighborhoods. Instead of saying, okay, Dornell Hill has non-compliant, we want to focus on that. It's Thane,
This
Main
path.
Street, this path, and so it's these long stretches. Most of them somehow cross a school, or get kids to the school, but it identifies, that, yeah, these are the schools within the corridor, and this is why it's, you know, a high level of importance. And as we check all of these off, you know, and as each year we get, I don't know, a couple $100,000 worth of grants. We put most of that towards schools, and then we identify that in the ADA we have a annual report that says, okay, here's what we identified in the ADA transition plan, here's the projects that we've done to date, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the city, it can be county, it can be private. These are the projects that were completed that get us closer in compliance with the ADA laws. But yes, I would like to see a more readily available, specifically, Jennifer, this is the campus, these are the ramps that are non-compliant, these, you know, something that's, somebody can say, you know, I can pull it up online, or I can talk to somebody at staff, you know, at the city staff and say, you didn't include this one, or you should incorporate that, or and give us something a little bit more transparent than what we have now.
So like, you know, you would have one of your CIP, you know, CDBG, ADA, curb ramp projects, and it's generic, but staff has a list and they identify, you know, they say on there that they have a, you know, full GIS list of all of that. And then they can say over the next 5 years, we want to prioritize these areas. Because sometimes the contractors, you know, you want to work in a certain zone. So you might say the orchard. So we're going to focus this year, we have a contractor, he's going to do all these areas for $250,000. And, you know, they'll knock out all, you know, these 10 intersections, I don't know,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and then that's done and completed, so then you can keep a running GIS map, so if somebody asks specifically on that, then you can bring, you know, ST whatever, you know, your ADA curb ramps, and then it also helps in your annual presentation saying, you know, we accomplished these 5 areas, and then people know as well, so it is one way so the list doesn't go long. But yeah, I noticed that too, it's like, you get a lot of developer fees?
No.
Okay.
I mean, we collect traffic impact fees and
No, specifically developer fees for parks,
No,
for
no.
signals, for, you know,
No.
when they're putting in a new subdivision.
we get traffic impact fees to offset their impact for transportation. So that will go towards signal improvements or anything else, but there is no impact fees for parks, fire, transportation, water, sewer. There's equity buy-in fees for water and sewer, but that's only to offset their impact to the current development, not future growth.
Okay,
Idaho does not have a lot of impact fees.
it's sometimes when they put in large subdivisions, that is going to change the whole dynamic of an entire community. So one of the things, I know engineers in the past, because they got bit so many times that they had to be bitten times to learn their lesson, that if a developer put in so much based on the traffic counts, they knew a signal would have to eventually be put in, that they would, you know, pay that as part of the approval of a, you know, that was one of the big ones everyone always had a fit was because traffic signals are people don't realize a traffic signal, that's why these are also good. A traffic signal costs $200,000 to install. And people are like, no, and you go, yes, 200,000. So sometimes that's where, and when people started learning about that, and poor engineering staff being, you know, beat up, and then it was, okay, you wanna put this in, then over the next 10 years as you're developing it, we'd like, you know, 15,000 each year to go towards a traffic signal, because you know you're
Yep.
going to, by the time that's done, you're stuck with the traffic signal. So that way money's coming in and you can document that for
Yeah,
but
yeah,
that's why I was asking.
Yeah, we
because-
have that, and what is the plan called, is it the East Orchard? Yeah, we have one.
Okay.
They pay into it by lot, so as they develop, they pay into
Oh,
it.
sometimes you can do it separate.
Orchard's TIA.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing to put in here, you know, so people understand and know about that too. It, you know, as a description, it's one of the funding sources, but a lot of bike routes. I don't know what to, I like your top 20, how's that? I don't know.
I've gotten feedback number 6, which is 20th Street North. Not be the highest and best use for.
I was wondering on that one for like a bike route through that industrial area.
Yeah,
It seems
yeah.
strange, but it
$3 million
looked like it was
project.
more than just a bike.
Yeah,
Widening, but
yeah.
you could throw rocks at a handful of these, but.
True.
The Fifth, or 9th Street from Idaho Street to Fifth Avenue, that's where the reconstruct retaining wall coming, is that retaining wall, is that a citizen's or is that a city?
That is a city, that's all within the right of way there, and so that one is actually,
'Cause that seems like it's actually leaning, it seems like driving by there.
that whole.
It might be perception.
Yeah, I don't know if it's perception or if it's reality, but I do know, that is an old grade. It looks rather new because the city has if you're going up the hill, the guardrail on the right has been rebuilt in the last 20 years. So it looks newer than the rest of it. You've got the retaining wall, which I'm not sure how old is, and if it needs any modifications, but what I have been told below, because we just repaved that 3 summers ago, it looks really a lot better than it actually is underneath, which I have not been underneath, but my understanding is it was built in the 30s and it's been rebuilt a little bit, but it's gonna require reconstruction, and it's actually gonna be done in, I think, 25 or 26, so that one will be completed here soon. Should put it on a 5-year plan.
Yes. And then people would know.
Yeah.
And they don't ask you those questions, you know. Do you have any thoughts on this? Or do you not want to, you want to reserve your comments?
No, I like the direction of the conversation. I think a 5-year CIP would be great, and consolidating the various CIPs into kind of one document would be helpful. I have to get going.
Project 98 on here would be nice, like that one, it'd be nice to move up the priority a little bit, just with this.
Which one?
98,
98.
that Snake River Avenue, especially now that that railroad track is out of there and everything else, it's kind of becoming a mess on the side where everybody's parking to get to the park, and I'm not sure if it,
That's why we have the no parking signs up forever and nobody can
Yeah.
figure out why. And it's just
Yeah.
because it's not stable for parking, so it's kind of, let everybody park there anyway.
And that would help folks. So what you just said, and what everybody just said, so if it had its own little description sheet, you know, that can say that it's not stable, right now, the da-da-da, you know, parking signs until da-da-da-da-da-da, then that would be part of the description on the sheet here for that, so people
Yeah.
get an understanding.
Yeah, 11, so there's two, so Snake River was broken into 3 phases. And you've got 100, which is ranked 11th, and you've got 98, which is ranked 15th. Actually, the one that you're calling out, 98, is gonna be constructed next year. So the 3 phases of Snake River was, phase 1 was the roundabout, which is obviously constructed. Phase 2 is the roundabout to 11th, which is that. And then phase 3 is 11th to basically First Street or Main Street. So, and that is, so that won't be, all that stuff along Kiwanis Park will not be improved with phase 2, which I would like to have a intermediate, because now that the train tracks are gone, because that was the big thing.
That was very nice.
We didn't know what the future was gonna be. Now the train tracks are gone. I would like to have something more transitional, even if it is gravel, because it doesn't even drain right now. If you go out there after a rainstorm, there's, a 4-foot puddle across the entire way, across the playground. So clean it up a little bit, make it more user-friendly. There was concern about backing into Snake River Avenue, and making it safe for users of the park. Snake River, actually, Kevin Kelly is one who would like to see Snake River Avenue lowered to 25. And that's a struggle because it's straight, it's got wide shoulders, but the more users in that area, the more it's gonna naturally want to slow down.
Even 30 would be good because of the businesses and things there as well. But yeah, during the summertime, driving that with all the families going in, I mean, it's, you gotta watch. That's true.
Or we go, pedestrian friendly through there, it's gonna even get worse.
Yeah, and they have done a corridor study there to see what the future of that corridor holds. Because it's a strange, Laura Von Tersch did it.
You're right, I thought she had.
Yeah, it was part of incorporated into like the waterfront plan.
Right, the waterfront.
But, you've got UGM, you've got multiple industrial users on that street, but yet then you have one of the more popular areas for recreation and family use right across the street. So Is it mixed use? Is it recreation? And then you got a good brewery and pizza place there.
Yeah.
And then you've got the grain growers, and then you've got the ready mix plant that's closed. So, kind of waiting, me personally is waiting, well, what's the private, somebody gonna come in and, go to the ready mix and put up a trampoline park? I don't know. I mean, is that a restaurant? Is that gonna change where traffic starts going? Cause you start seeing, development in blocks like that change traffic, change the character of that neighborhood real quick.
What's it zoned for?
I don't remember. It is some sort of commercial zoning, I'm not quite sure.
I'm sure it's got a couple overlays on it.
Yeah,
Okay, because residential's right next to it and stuff, so it's gotta have recreation, residential, and so the overlay's really complex, I would imagine.
yeah,
Wasn't Prime Land at one point in time going to relocate?
so,
And I've not heard anything since Laura's been gone.
yeah, I haven't heard anything on that.
And that would
so-
help give us a little more of an idea for that whole street, if that, because taking out the tracks and relocating, helping Prime Land to relocate will certainly give opportunities that aren't there right now.
Mhm.
And then we can have a clearer picture, but.
Ready for my next 2:00.
Okay.
Question on the regular meeting January.
Oh, yes, let's move along.
So you guys can keep going, but I
It
gotta.
was good, it was good conversation, thank you, and thank you for,
Okay, so the next is upcoming events and meetings, so the January 10th meeting, I should be here.
And I will just say, so, both of our council liaisons, they may not be appointed in January to this commission because their term expires January 2024 with this commission. So the mayor may shuffle the deck and we may get
Our
new.
city councilors are,
See, we hadn't, this is the first year.
yeah.
But it was formed 3 years ago. And so that's why I was very confused at but I went to him and said, I want to complete my 3-year term with him. And he's got it down as 2-year fixed.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't,
Huh.
well, I guess I won't even predict. I don't think there would be anybody who would wanna step in, who would take your term from you, but it's all part, you guys get the horse trade, that's not for us.
Okay, well, I can plan to be here anyway.
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
well,
We won't
well-
tattle on you even if you haven't been appointed yet.
well, I would think so, just because, being the chair, and if we know, then we maybe get that meeting or something, if we know, then the next meeting, we have to agendize,
Yeah, I think usually the council tries to, I mean, because there's different time commitments for each different board that you serve on, and so making sure that, not one counselor has like the once a year boards or whatever, and one counselor, and then you've got, MPO kind of matches this board pretty well, so it wouldn't make sense to try and keep them if they have the time to be on both, but not necessarily.
So
I don't
then-
think anything would change until February.
Yeah.
That's,
I'm planning to be here
Oh, okay.
January 10th.
Okay, all right.
I'm out of town, may be able to call in, but.
Okay, so then, opportunity to request a special meeting? Do you need any of that this time?
You kind of loaded us down, we got some work to do on staff-wise.
Well,
Requesting a breather, aren't we? Okay.
that's.
You can
okay.
request a meeting, we just might not show up.
Okay, unfinished and new business? Commissioners' comments? Staff liaison comments? I made too many the other day. Not to do again. Future agenda items? I think we're gonna postpone that. Adjournment. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, and a second?
We
Oh, we don't have.
No, you don't.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't
Don't have-
adjourn, you don't have a.
Oh, okay.
you have to be
All right.
here forever. No,
All right.
you don't have to vote. We can
Okay,
just
good, all right.
Away.
I just realized, I was like, oh, we don't have.